In 1949, while rivals rushed out flimsy, thin-gauge cars for post-war export, Rover built the P4. Dismissed by passers-by as the sleepy, conservative Auntie Rover, it was actually an industrial paradox. Beneath its traditional exterior lay a masterclass in severe overengineering, a vehicle built with the rugged mass of a tank, yet assembled with the silent precision of a watch. To understand how the Rover P4 came to exist, one must understand the harsh, grim reality of industrial Britain in the late 1940s. The country was financially exhausted from the Second World War, and the government's message to the manufacturing sector was brutal and singular: export or die. Steel was strictly rationed, and car companies were only allocated materials if they promised to ship the vast majority of their vehicles overseas to bring back foreign currency. For most mainstream manufacturers, the solution to this crisis was simple and cheap. They turned to thin-gauge, low-grade steel, simplified their assemblies, and rushed vehicles off the line as quickly as possible. The goal was volume, not longevity. Vehicles from this era were notoriously fragile, prone to severe rusting within a few short years, and plagued by structural flexing. The management at Rover's Solihull factory looked at this emerging landscape of disposable cars and flatly refused to participate. Led by the brilliant Wilks brothers, Spencer and Maurice, Rover held a fiercely protected reputation for premium quality, and they decided that post-war austerity would not dictate a drop in their engineering standards. They knew that if a customer was going to spend their hard-earned money on a Rover in a time of national economic hardship, that vehicle had to represent absolute value through structural permanence. Instead of trimming down components to save a few ounces of steel, Rover's engineers did the exact opposite. They designed a massive, fully boxed steel chassis frame that resembled a literal railway bridge structure more than a traditional passenger car floor pan. This decision created an immediate corporate conflict. Building a vehicle with this level of structural rigidity meant dealing with immense weight and excessive manufacturing costs at a time when resources were at an absolute premium. It was a massive gamble that flew directly in the face of the era's mass production trend. If Rover was going to survive under these strict government material quotas, they couldn't rely on brute force alone. They had to balance this heavy, indestructible foundation with brilliant, unconventional engineering solutions elsewhere on the car. They were trapped between their unyielding desire for tank-like strength and the harsh reality of post-war material limits, forcing the design team to rethink the very metallurgy and mechanical layout of the luxury saloon. With the heavy chassis locked into the design blueprint, Rover's engineering team faced an immediate powertrain dilemma. A vehicle built with such structural mass required immense, effortless torque to pull it away from a standstill and maintain high-speed highway momentum. Yet, standard post-war engine configurations offered a frustrating compromise. Traditional side-valve engines were remarkably quiet, but suffered from terrible gas flow and low efficiency, while emerging overhead valve designs offered better power but were inherently noisy, clattery, and mechanically harsh. For a company obsessed with refined silence, neither option was acceptable. Rover's solution was to resurrect and master a highly unusual, complex layout: the inlet over exhaust, or F-head, engine geometry. This configuration was a packaging marvel that required two completely separate camshaft and valve train operations within a single block. The intake valve was positioned horizontally in the cylinder head, operating directly above the piston, while the exhaust valve sat vertically inside the engine block itself. This layout created a unique, highly distorted, wedge-shaped combustion chamber. When the piston compressed the fuel-air mixture, the unusual geometry forced the gases into a violent, highly optimized swirl pattern. This meant the fuel burned with immense efficiency and uniformity, allowing the engine to run on the notoriously low-octane, poor-quality pool petrol of post-war Britain, without suffering from destructive engine knocking or pinging. More importantly, this intricate layout allowed Rover to fit massive intake valves into the cylinder head, far larger than what a standard overhead valve engine could accommodate. The engine could breathe deeply and effortlessly, producing a beautifully flat, tractor-like torque curve at incredibly low RPMs. Because the exhaust valves were buried deep within the cast iron block, surrounded by thick cooling jackets, thermal stress was drastically reduced, meaning the valves rarely burned out or required adjustment. It was an incredibly expensive, complex valve train to manufacture, requiring meticulous machining tolerances and a sophisticated network of rocker arms and push rods. However, the result was an engine that didn't just push the P4 forward. It operated with an eerie, glassy smoothness, completely free of the harsh mechanical vibrations that plagued every other 4- and 6-cylinder power unit of the era. While the F-head engine provided the necessary mechanical refinement, the sheer physical mass of the P4's over-engineered steel chassis presented an immediate penalty on the weighing scales. A car that is completely unyielding in its structural rigidity risks becoming an overweight, sluggish monolith that destroys its fuel economy and strains its suspension components. Rover's engineers needed to shed serious weight from the upper body to lower the car's center of gravity. But they were still trapped by strict post-war government steel rations. To solve this crisis, the team turned away from traditional automotive manufacturing and looked toward advanced aerospace material science, uncovering a specialized alloy known as Burmabrite. Burmabrite was an exceptional aluminum-magnesium alloy that had proven its mettle in the structural frames of wartime aircraft. It was incredibly light, weighing roughly a third of conventional sheet steel, yet its unique chemical composition meant it possessed extraordinary tensile strength and unparalleled resistance to corrosion. Rover made the radical, expensive decision to manufacture the P4's bonnet, the boot lid, and all 4 passenger doors entirely out of this aerospace-grade alloy. This created a highly advanced, hybrid structural design, an incredibly dense, heavy steel foundation on the bottom to absorb road shocks, paired with a featherweight, rust-proof aluminum skin on top. This metallurgy sharing wasn't an isolated experiment. It was happening right alongside another rugged Solihull project, the early series Land Rovers, which used the exact same Burmabrite alloy out of sheer necessity. However, where the Land Rover used flat, rudimentary sheets creased over simple tooling, the P4 required these complex aluminum panels to be flawlessly pressed into elegant, sweeping compound curves. Stamping aluminum to coach-built luxury standards was an industrial nightmare, as the alloy tended to split and tear under traditional steel presses. It required specialized, slow-speed tooling and highly skilled hand finishing to ensure the panel gaps were micro-perfection. It was a wildly inefficient way to mass-produce a car, but for Rover, the sacrifice was entirely worth it. They had successfully weaponized material science to trim away the fat, leaving behind a lightweight upper body that perfectly balanced the vehicle's bulletproof chassis. When the Rover P4 was finally unleashed onto the open tarmac of the 1950s, the fruits of this uncompromising engineering became instantly clear. This was an era when long-distance travel was a brutal, fatiguing experience. The world's newly constructed asphalt turnpikes and motorways regularly exposed the structural flaws of mainstream automobiles. At speeds above 50 miles per hour, most contemporary family saloons vibrated violently, filled their passenger cabins with deafening road roar, and required constant, nervous steering corrections just to stay in a straight line. They were flimsy machines operating at the absolute limit of their structural tolerance. The P4 didn't merely cruise past these struggling vehicles. It isolated its passengers in an entirely different dimension of refinement. When the F-head engine was pushed to a sustained 80 miles per hour, there was no mechanical drama, no frantic valve clatter, and no exhausting resonance. Because the heavy, boxed steel chassis frame acted as a massive acoustic dampener. It absorbed the harsh frequencies of the road before they could ever reach the cabin. Rover's engineers had meticulously isolated the entire body using thick, specialized rubber mounting blocks and filled the interior floorboards with dense, heavy, sound-deadening felt. The result was a 1.5-ton luxury liner that sliced through the air with a level of composure that left rival manufacturers utterly stunned. Driving a P4 at high speeds felt less like operating a motor car and more like sitting in a stationary, wood-paneled British library. The steering remained laser straight, anchored by the car's low center of gravity and rigid foundation, while the valve train operated with a faint, rhythmic hum that was easily drowned out by the dashboard clock. Veteran highway patrols and automotive journalists of the era noted with astonishment that you could hold a whispered conversation in a P4 at maximum cruising speed, a feat previously reserved only for vehicles wearing a Rolls-Royce or Bentley badge. Rover had proven to the world that pure obsessive engineering and structural mass could conquer the harsh physics of high-speed travel, turning a conservative saloon into the ultimate long-distance weapon. By 1964, Rover had meticulously crafted 130,342 P4 units over a spectacular 15-year run. Defying post-war austerity and fleeting design whims, its incredible longevity proved that absolute quality never goes out of style. Today, in a landscape of disposable electronics and built-in obsolescence, this mechanical masterpiece stands as a stubborn monument, combining the unyielding structural mass of a tank with the silent, microscopic precision of a fine watch.